Hi there, and welcome to Fantasy for the Ages, the show where father and son sit down and talk about fantasy books. I'm the son of that equation, Zach.
And I'm the father, Jim. Thanks for joining us today for another one of our episodes where we're going to talk about fantasy books indeed. And we're going to have some fun. But before we do that, Zachary David, how are you doing today?
I'm okay. We're recording this just after Halloween, one of my least favorite holidays, but it's one of Rachel's favorites, so I humor her.
There you go.
And
Did you
we
dress up?
celebrated. We did. And we even did with Rolly. It's a nice little, like, 3-person organized costume thing. Rach and I were Raven and Beast Boy, with Rolly as our Robin for Teen Titans.
Okay, I'm like, who? What? Okay, that's not
You got
something I've
there.
watched. Gotcha.
I figured you're just enough of a nerd, you might just, like, know things.
Isn't that DC Comics though?
It is DC Comics, that is correct.
So I wouldn't know. I'm such a Marvel guy.
Well, you can keep using that defense. But no, we watched a movie that neither of us had seen. I think of it as like an older movie. It came out the year I was born, if I remember correctly. So we watched Sleepy Hollow, the one with Johnny Depp.
Ah, okay.
It was okay. Wasn't bad. It was entertaining.
All right.
How are you, Dad?
I'm doing fine. I did not dress up for Halloween. I'm actually traveling this week, and so your mother was at home dealing with all the people ringing the bell, wanting candy. Although, interestingly, since I was just in a hotel room, I was able to watch some of that because when they ring the doorbell, we have a, Nest doorbell. I get notification. I could bring it up and watch her giving candy to the kids. I jokingly was saying, I should like totally scare them through the through the microphone of it. I was never that mean.
But also
Make some 4-year-old start crying.
A little weird.
Who wants my candy?
Worth it.
Maybe next year. Even though I'll be there next year, I'm gonna try to be home for Halloween and not make Mom have to do all that by herself.
You could always be lame and just turn the lights off. Not answer the door.
Well, that's what she did after she got rid of the candy that was yucky that she didn't want to have left. You know how that goes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I'm going to put my thumb in the way here. There was dust on my camera. That's what happens when I travel with it. So I had to clear that off in case it was coming through. Looks like you are drinking something tonight. What you drinking?
Tonight I've got a sangria spritz. We made up some sangria, so fresh fruit and wine and brandy and sugar and all just mixed up and stuff.
All good
we
stuff.
drank through the first batch, so we made more with the same fruit and just kind of like, you just keep it going, right?
Yeah. Mom really digs a good sangria, so when we come to visit in a couple of weeks, maybe have some whipped
maybe we'll
up
make
for her
this
and
again.
She'll be happy. Yeah, there you
it's
go.
Pretty tasty.
I sadly am drinking nothing because I have only water here.
What do you mean?
I forgot
You're
to get a glass before we started. Huh?
You're in a hotel. They have a bar. They might not have a bar, but they probably have some level of bar.
In this hotel. What kind of hotels do you think I stay in? This is a cheap hotel. Holiday Inn Express, man.
Gotcha. I mean, they might still have a bar. Have you looked?
They do not have a bar. I walked, I checked in. I had to walk through the hotel. And in fact, this hotel is half not put together. They're remodeling downstairs.
The remodeling
I
bar.
I had to climb over structures to get into my room. It was like, this is wild. So, yeah, whatever. It's all good. All right. It hasn't been that long since we talked last, has it? I don't think so.
No, it's been less than a week, I think.
Yeah, I think so. How'd that happen?
I don't know. Some weird combination of scheduling that means we might not talk again for like 3 weeks.
Yeah, maybe. Scheduling. I have to schedule more episodes because I barely have anything on the schedule after this. So maybe I'll do some of that later tonight. But I did want to ask, have you started reading anything new since we talked last? The answer could be
Yeah,
no.
yeah, no, I did.
Oh, yeah.
I started and finished Leviathan Falls. Um,
Then that's a new series we have a chance to talk about.
and after that, then went back to Red Rising, and have started Iron Gold, the start of the follow up kind of continuation from the trilogy.
Okay. Okay. Well, you just made my scheduling better because the next What We Really Think episode will have to be The Expanse.
It'll work.
I look forward to that conversation. But that segues nicely into what we are here for today, because this is the second of our What We Really Think episodes, a new theme to episodes where Zach and I get together and we talk about stuff we've read now in full. And we just talk about what do we think about all the different facets of it, characters, story, themes, whatever we want to talk about. It's not particularly scripted. I just have a bunch of stuff I want to talk about, things that I'll prompt, and Zach, you'll just go where you want to go to as we spend time talking about the book. Things we like, things we didn't like, we're telling it like it is. So let's talk about the First Law Trilogy.
Just the trilogy.
Just the trilogy, not the books that come after that. So the first 3 books only.
To just put us in kind of the right mindset here, have you read any more than the first 3 yet?
I have not. Have you?
Neither have I yet.
Good.
So
Good. This
we're
is
in,
a safe space.
we're at the
then.
same place. I won't say any spoilers that I might know beyond what I've actually read. We're good.
Good. So we're talking about The Blade itself, Before They Are Hanged, and Last Argument of Kings. Is there, I mean, there really is, it's 3 different stories, but it's really one big story.
It's
they
really
flow into
a
each
singular
other.
narrative.
But thinking of the different foci and style of these 3 books, is there one that you prefer over the other 2?
Yeah, I can pull that out pretty easily. I'm pretty sure it's Last Argument of Kings. Let me just go check my notes because it cracked my top 10. Yeah, Last Argument of Kings is better than the other 2. Simply because at the end of the day, this is a series that for me is like the trilogy is one narrative. So getting those payoffs and conclusions is really sweet.
Especially when the conclusions show us in part that the story was not necessarily what we thought it was. There's some reveals in that last book that are pretty sweet. We'll get to that as we talk about this stuff. I want to start out with, just as I was thinking over these books again, preparing to talk to you, that the setting itself of the whole story, it kind of reminds me, and Joe Abercrombie, the author, probably did this on purpose. It reminds me of ancient Rome. You know, how Rome was this nation that grew strong and then branched out and pushed out, conquering, stretching beyond its bounds, and then started to decay. And the forces that they had been able to, the nation states or whatnot that they'd been able to conquer, now started to rise, started to unite, started to get strong. So like, we're talking about the Union here in these books being like Rome. And then we have the North that is like the Germanic states, you know, who then started to gather and become more united and pushed back in a hard way. So we see that. And then the Gurkish Empire, come on, it's practically the Turkish Empire there. You know, the
maybe
same kind of thing, and pushing back, trying to repel those who had, you know, come in and taken apart. So is that just me, or do you see it too?
I come from an interesting place here because I've been reading like Red Rising so much, which has huge ties to a lot of Roman culture and how they interact and stuff. So when we talk about like, hey, is this feeling Romish? we have to think about the fact Rome spans 1,000 years. Which Rome are you talking about? And yeah, I can totally see your point that there is a version of Rome that this feels like, but in like the civil unrest and the way it's dealing with other powers, absolutely. But when you look at the interior structure of the Union, it doesn't strike me as Rome. So
No. I'm all in still that this is
I'm
like
not.
Rome because what we see in the story of the Union is Rome in the latter days in that sense, with the corruption, with bread and circuses. But the Union was better before, and it's been around a long time. We're seeing it late in the game. And we know it's been around a long time because Baez, the first of the Magi, was around at the founding of the Union. And
He's been
he's
around a
really, really
long time.
old. He's over 1,000 years old. Okay.
Granted,
So,
it never says that Baez was a young man at the founding of the Union. No, he was around
no.
at the beginning. That doesn't tell us a whole lot. We do actually get some numbers, I believe, at some point, and it's many hundreds of years old at this point. Um, but I'll go with you. Late days Roman Empire. I'm good with that. Is it a
Okay.
perfect connect? No, but does it draw like similar ideas, theories, and inspiration? Absolutely. No, I'm good with that.
Yeah. You don't have to make up every story. There's some great stories of from real history that you can now use as the basis to create a different world, a different fantasy tale, and there's nothing wrong with that. And Abercrombie does that well here. But of course, he adds some super unique elements to this that you never saw in the Roman Empire.
I mean, I'm a big believer of there is nothing new under the sun, just different ways to present it. And like I said, the Roman Empire expands over 1,000 years of human
Mm-hmm.
history. That's got to be a good half of what we have for well recorded history.
Sure.
So, I mean, you're gonna hit it.
So, nothing new under the sun. Interesting things here. Let's talk about the Inquisitors. This is, a role, a group of characters that serves an interesting position
Yeah, no one
in the
expects
Union.
them.
No one expects the Union Inquisition. Indeed. Uh, kind of a police force, justice system, and torture experts all wrapped up in one. Kind of, secret police that aren't so
It
secret
it
because
is
when they're
kind of
coming, you're
secret
in trouble.
police, except with a more not like exalted place in society because people still look at it in high society and anyone involved in it and they're like, ew, icky, don't want
Mm-hmm,
to don't want to
mm-hmm.
touch that too much. But it is still an elevated place. You have station and power.
They remind me of the KGB back in the day. In the Soviet Union, the KGB were the secret police, yet people knew who the powers in the KGB were. No one liked the KGB, but you respected the KGB. And if you got brought in by the KGB, you knew you were screwed. They didn't bring in anyone who was innocent because you're assumed guilty until proven innocent. That's how
And
they
so you're
operated.
assumed guilty until forced to say that you were guilty.
Well, that's definitely how it plays
Oh,
out for the
we see that
Inquisitors.
in the books, absolutely.
Yeah.
And honestly, I am shocked at how effective they actually are. Because I would totally think that they'd get it wrong more often than they seem to actually get it wrong.
Well, and that's the thing. They blended not just this ability to torture, but they blended it with actual investigative ability. So when they bring someone in, they're like 99% sure they have the right guy. And now they just need to get the answers out of them. I don't know how realistic it
There
is,
were
if you
too
can be
many
that
times.
sure.
There were so many times when I was like, this feels like it's just someone's power play to like they were wanting to clear up this space or get rid of a rival. But then it comes out that no, the plot that they're pinning on them actually exists.
Right?
The Mercers were actually doing this shady thing
Yeah.
and like
Yeah.
messing with the unions and stuff. And it's like, oh, I thought you were just getting rid of competitors because they were getting too powerful and they didn't want to pay their taxes.
Mm-hmm.
You
Mm-hmm.
mean they were actually doing it?
Of course, it helps that this is a grim, dark story. So, I mean, there's really nobody around who's innocent. Everybody's guilty of something, so you just have to figure out which thing they've done wrong.
And if they're not guilty of some actual crime or horrendous thing, they are guilty of being a bit too naive about the world. And they're probably not going to last very long.
Yeah, you're not a safe person here if you're naive. Mm-mm. Somebody who is a little naive in a weird sort of way, you might say, is Logan Ninefingers.
There is a intentional forcing himself to see the best in the world and believe better, because he wants to believe it's better, not because he actually does.
He wants to believe he can be better. So
And-
he needs to believe the world can be better.
And I think if he let himself, he could be. But he falls too easily on it needs to be this way. I don't want it to be, but this is the only way I know how, and it needs to be. I'm like, dude, but what if it didn't?
Yeah.
You spent so long trying to fighting. You trying to fight being the guy who beats other people up and kills them to instill fear and control and get your way that way. Why do you go back?
Yeah, he is an interesting character, and certainly one of the primary characters of the series. And when we meet Logan, he's already at the point where he's trying to escape or flee from the person that had made him famous. You know, the persona. All that was Logan Ninefingers, the Bloody Nine. You know, and we come, of course, to learn the Bloody Nine is actually an alter ego of his. He goes berserker mode, and he no longer can control his actions. This other persona takes over. And we see it in some nasty ways later in the story when his self-control fails.
You
when
know
he's
what Logan
trying not to let it
Ninefingers
out.
needed? He needed therapy. You know what he got
Oh.
instead? Baez.
You can't pin everything on Baez, though.
No, but
Logan makes his own
does
choices in some cases.
choose to steer and manipulate, and a lot of this story you can pin in some way, shape, or form on his manipulation.
Sure. No, that's true. That's true. When we come upon the story, you know, it starts with Logan. It's a great start to the first book. You know, Logan is on the run from the Shanka and leaping off a cliff to, you know, as a last chance to get away and save his life. But he's in this circumstance in the first place because he's trying to flee from King Bethad, who he helped put on the throne.
Mm-hmm.
Logan Ninefingers, and especially leaning into his Bloody Nine persona, is the force, the power that was the tipping point for Bethad to overcome everybody else and become the king. He could be sitting there at the king's right hand in the lap of luxury now. And instead, he's like, I'm done. I am out. This is... So if things are a little rough and miserable for him in the beginning, it's his own fault, actually. He just doesn't like what he had become.
Now, granted, I don't know if I would either, considering his life had become being paraded out to go toe-to-toe with the hardest killers out there and kill them or subjugate them. Like, I think the worst part for Logan there and why he needed to get away from it is because he enjoyed it too much.
Okay.
He knows that about himself. And he's like, I could get used to this. I could get comfy with this. I have been. And Bethad turns it around him at the end. They're talking before, Bethad bites it. And he's like, I didn't push you to all this. You pushed me. I was the figurehead, but you were the bloodthirsty one wanting all this. And
exactly.
I think he's right.
This is where we're not really supposed to feel bad for Logan. What we should feel bad for is all the people who've been hurt by Logan, including, at times, some of the bad guys. they're in the circumstance they are and seen as the bad guys because of what Logan has done to them or their family in the past.
Some of them, at least.
Yeah, definitely. One of the moments in the story connected to Logan that most I was like, oh, was right there at the end with King Bethad, where he's gonna, he's overthrowing him finally. He's overcomes uh, the Feared. What
Hmm.
was his first name? Fenris. Fenris the Feared. And he's had to let the Berserker out. And now the Berserker, the Bloody Nine, does not care who he hurts, who he kills. He's just going to do mass destruction and see Bethad dead. And he ends up killing his best friend. The one of his small group that had stood beside him. And even when others were finally doubting him, he was still there for him. And he sticks him through the neck with a sword, just in a
Gets
bloody
better.
rage.
That's not when that happens. Yes, that happens. That happens earlier. It's not when he kills Fenris the Feared and when he kills Bethad.
What?
He
That
kills the
happened earlier?
friend while holding off the gates. Um,
No, isn't that after?
nope, because that's the last stand before then they go find Bethad in his hidey hole castle.
Ah, okay.
I've read
Yeah,
these a
you're
little
right.
bit more recently, so I'm
You're right.
a
You're
little
right.
bit more on it. And yeah, it's things are looking bad. All of them are a little bit injured, and what is it, Tol Daro or
That's it.
something?
Tull
The kind
Tuldar.
of giant
Yeah.
um comes down, and Logan basically is like not differentiating between friend and foe. He just sees you have a sword. I need that. And he
Yeah.
stabs his friend in the neck, takes it, and is killing
It's just
indiscriminately.
it's so meaningless and brutal. And I'm like, oh,
And it's 100% like other people in the crew later on. It's like, I could have forgiven you for this or for that or for this or
but
that.
not that.
But that one,
That was the one bridge
after
too far.
everything, there's no coming back.
Which is not entirely why Black Dow betrays him later.
No, it's his excuse.
It's his excuse. That's
It's a
right.
good excuse.
Oh yeah, yeah. But Black Dow, he was never that particularly loyal in the first
I'm not
place. He
saying
was the scumbag of the group. Everybody knew it.
Black Dow's not in the right, but he's not really in the wrong in this time either.
Nobody's gonna bemoan that he's ousted the Bloody Nine. No,
No.
everybody hates Logan. So
Now,
that's an easy move.
if he then tries to take his place, people might get upset then. But just ousting, getting rid of that problem, it's like,
Yeah.
no, we're good.
I like how it led to symmetry, though, for Logan's character. The story starts with him leaping off a cliff to escape. The story ends for Logan with him leaping off a waterfall to escape the betrayal. And in this book, we don't know if he survives that or not.
Oh yeah, I love that it very clearly isn't clear. He might be dead. He might not be. We've seen him survive things that he really
Yes.
shouldn't.
You'd
So
have to read more books to find out, which I do plan to do eventually. All right. So we've talked about Inquisitors and we've talked about Logan, but I want to jump back to Inquisitors because I want to talk about Sandan Glokta a little bit here.
all right, we can talk about Glokta.
To me, he's the most fascinating character in the entire trilogy.
He's a very interesting character. I think there's a lot to be seen and enjoyed by his character. I still think I'm probably in the right that if you are talking to a girl at a party and she says that this is her favorite character, like in all fantasy, definitely in this series, like, oh, you have to read this series and love this character. Red flag. I'm still saying it. Like it still is.
Now, be clear, I didn't necessarily say he's my favorite character, but he is the most fascinating character. I do feel that way. His background, which has left him crippled physically, bitter mentally, but also extremely sharp still. This is a very competent man.
I love a broken character. So like there's a lot to like here. There's a
Yeah.
lot to not like here too.
Abercrombie's writing of Glocta when he introduces him, though, is some brilliant prose. Well, I don't know if prose is the right word, but the way he introduces the character, you feel how broken this man is,
You
how
simultaneously
brutal it is just
feel
getting up every morning. And
you
that's his life.
simultaneously yeah, you feel the pain, but you don't feel for him.
You don't feel for him much at all in the first book, but the second book humanizes him. So started liking Glocta in the second book. I mean, I appreciated the character in the first book, but I'm on Team Glocta as you move through the second book.
If you
There he
want
is in Dagoska, and everything's against him, and he's a stand-up character.
if you want to talk about something that really humanizes and makes him somewhat redeemable or likable, you really have to look at Artie West.
Yes, yes, which especially comes up by the time we're getting late in the third book. You know, the two of them basically at the end, they're not a couple, but they're a couple who will care for each other.
They
Okay?
are very much a partnership, not a
Yeah.
relationship.
Nope. I mean,
But
it's a
that
kind of relationship, but it's not a love relationship. There's not that sort of thing going on, but they're almost in a way a power couple.
and I love that it's messy and complicated enough to leave the door open of like there's nothing romantic here,
But there
but at the
could
same
be,
time, like it's not saying that never's gonna happen.
right?
And we would be okay if it did, but also a little bit weirded out or grossed out on a couple of different levels.
Well, everybody knows Artie West is a looker. Okay, she's beautiful. That's
And
not what Glocta really cares about. He sees the mind. He sees who this person is, and he appreciates that. I mean,
I
there's
think
more to why he's has some care for her, but I think he appreciates the personality, the person inside the bod, and I think she also sees a little deeper about who he is.
I think an often overlooked and underrated illustration of how attractive Artie West is the fact that she's talked about being not conventionally attractive. She's talked about well, she's got the wrong hair for the style, like the wrong color and wrong kind of eyes and wrong this, that, or whatever. And it's like, okay, people only gossip about that and really focus in on that if it's because they're trying to cover up the fact that they're jealous that she's prettier.
Wildly jealous, yes.
It's like, no, she is incredibly beautiful, and you have to point out that it's out of style because otherwise she makes you look bad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
She's also a raging alcoholic, so there are problems.
Everyone in this book has issues of one kind or another. Most of them have multiple issues. Speaking of issues, let's talk about Baez, first of the Magi. Total scumbag. Or is he?
By the end, I think he ends up being like my favorite character because there are so many layers and manipulation and change, and he's been around for so long, and we get revelations. We're full spoiler here, right?
We are totally. These are 100% full spoiler.
We get revelations where we've been seeing this one way the whole time, and then we're like, oh wait, hold on. Is the big bad villain who broke the second law, is he actually in the right because Baez did lead to their master dying, and he did end up killing the actual first magi and the actual maker and his love interest who he maybe manipulated into loving him so that he could do this whole thing in the first place?
You're
And this
getting
all
back to
happened
scumbag.
thousands
Yes.
of years before our story takes place, and this grudge is still going on.
And then Baez has controlled and manipulated the narrative. So Kulul is the bad guy now. But wait a second.
Let's go a step further. He's controlled and constructed the world, this empire. The Union only exists to be his vessel for this, to control that piece of power and that location. as he still needs it to get into, so that he can break the one law that you're not supposed to break, that even I'm gonna just mess with this, that even Kahlua won't break. Um, what?
Yeah, you use the word multiple times now, manipulation. Baez manipulates everybody and everything to achieve his own ends. So, okay, scumbag. But then again, he, in being a scumbag who's serving his own purposes, he's also accomplishing some things that are very good for a lot of people.
If you're a horrible person to the people who are closest to you, but you live long enough and do horrible things long enough that you create a world of general peace and stability that does actually give a generally decent quality of life to pretty much everyone, you're still a horrible person, but like most of the world doesn't even know you exist and just benefits.
Yeah, yeah. So, is Baez a good guy or is he a bad guy? Or is the answer just yes?
I think that final supposition is something you could say about any character in this book.
I'm reading another book right now that made the argument recently that's made in a lot of books, and I want to bring it in here because it applies. Evil. In many fantasy books, evil is subjective. In the book I'm reading right now, it's a demon who's making this case.
Mm-hmm.
But, he's being asked, is he truly evil? And no, he's living according to his nature. And what someone says is evil is a value judgment placed on his actions. But from his perspective, he's just doing what's natural. Why is that evil? So Baez just doing what he's supposed to do, is it good, is it bad, or is it just it is?
I think there's a great point of him eventually showing the narrative of being like, look, we've created this story and history and waged huge wars in the past because Glustrad was evil. But you know what's the difference between Glustrad and me? He lost.
I won. I'm still
That's
here.
the only difference. And it's amazing to be like, yeah, he lost, so he's the bad guy. But I won. I'm the hero. I'm the good guy now.
Baez would say, if you could actually get him to talk about it, that he transcends the moral judgments of others.
There is no
None of that's relevant to him.
good or evil really in judgment. There's
He
just
defines
power.
what is. Mm-hmm.
And if you have that power, you get to decide what is good and what is bad. And who that applies to.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I want to talk about that a little later in the episode again. So we'll come back to that. But I want to talk just about some general things now. Is this story really the story of Baez versus Khalul and the pawns they use? Or is it the story of Logan Ninefingers and Column West and Giselle, I always have trouble saying his name. Giselle
Jezbal.
Dan Luthar. That's easier to say. The last part of his name. Is it their stories? Or again, is it really just Baez v. Khalul and their pawns?
As I read it, it feels like it's mostly all the other people's stories and the nations that we've seen. It's those stories of how they try to navigate the chess game that exists there without knowing it's going on. Because their choices and things are not all decided for them. They're not moved. But there is that grander game going on between Khalul and Baez. That's happening.
And there are things decided for them that they don't even realize have been decided. That's where they are pawns.
And that absolutely does happen. But the way they see it then is often, yeah, the world just shifted this way. This is how it is. And I have to try and make the best that I can in this situation. Think Glokta in the second book. He ends up down in... Don't even make me try. Dash up, pick up a stand.
It's not that hard. Dagoska. That's what you're talking about, isn't it?
It definitely ends in like a
The
stand, doesn't
city.
it?
No, Dagoska. That's all it is.
I'm not sure about that. It was one of those
You're
words
getting
when I
confused
read
already
in a book.
by Malazan, probably.
No,
That's got a
that
Tajikistan or
does have
something.
a stand at the end of it. It does.
Yes.
But it's one of those words that I just see in the book and I go, I'm not even going to try. I'm just going to skip past it every time.
We
I
talked about
know
that
what we're
recently,
talking
didn't we?
about. It's that place.
Anything we can't pronounce, we'll just call it Tajikistan now. Okay, let's just do
So-
that. It's Tajikistan.
So Glokta there is a perfect example of these are circumstances that were out of his control that he was manipulated into, and he's just trying to make the best of it and do what he can to survive.
And not get eaten.
And
Literally.
in that way, that situation is a case study for the trilogy.
Okay. This is one of the greater themes, I think, that Abercrombie puts into the story, though. That, in some ways in real life, we're also pawns. There are greater forces beyond us that we can't control and we can't do anything about. Yet, we do decide how we react to our environments. We do get to decide, are we going to try to make the best of things? Or are we just going to sit there and say life sucks and there's nothing I can do about it?
And
and he shows us both kinds of characters in his story.
when you exist in a grimdark universe, there's always the chance that whatever situation you were in, whatever level you're playing at, whether you're one of the masters with many, many pawns down the line, or you're somewhere in the middle, or maybe you're the bottom rung of the ladder and you don't even know there are things above you, there's always a chance that some random bloke is just going to turn around and be like, nah, today's the day, and end it all.
And then don't forget from the great Qui-Gon Jinn, there's always a bigger fish.
There is.
Yes. All right. A few other things here to jump in on. Pacing of the story. Did it work for you? Did the story move along at the pace you enjoyed? Did it drag too much? What did you think?
I generally enjoyed it. However, I did think that the books tended, especially in like the first book, tended to just kind of like plod along at about the same pace until the end. And there's like, okay, now everything happens right at the end, but not really. Just kind of like takes towards the next thing. And then there were some ebbs and flows through the second book. And then the third book felt like it had like 3 different sections where it like rose and climaxed and rose and climaxed. And it was like, are we getting near the end of the book yet? And so it was weird pacing to me. It wasn't bad pacing.
Okay.
It was just not what you expect from a book, usually.
My experience with it is not quite what you described. I didn't have any pacing problems with the first book. It just moved along, and it seemed pretty steady to me, and I didn't struggle at all. I just kept moving on and enjoying what I'm reading and learning. The third book, I see what you're saying there. There's a few different arcs, but individually, they're paced well.
Yeah.
So I think it has a lot to do also with why the third book is our preferred book of the 3. The middle one, every time they went to the section where they're after the seed, it dragged. That was a little boring to me. There's moments in it. There's a few moments, but that stuff was too long. Give me Glokta down into Goska. That's good stuff. Anyways.
I think the seed sections were paced like the first book, and the DGBB sections were paced like the third book.
Okay.
And so in the second book, when you're jumping between them, it felt a little weird. But what you're describing of it kind of being like, yeah, it just kind of continues to plod at where it's at. And there's moments, but it just kind of continues at its at. That's the first book. You didn't mind it because it was a lot of world building that you needed and you were interested in. You were buying into it. You minded it in the second book because there were breaks that you were jumping to totally different, interesting action.
Okay.
And not always action, but like intrigue.
Okay. What'd you think of the magic in this trilogy?
It's one of the series that I think has worked well for me doing a hard soft magic system, which is to say
Okay.
it's a very hard magic system kind of thing. But they briefly explain a little bit of it so that you know it's complicated enough that they don't bother explaining the rest of it.
We don't want to get stuck in the details of it. It's a lot of Merlin style magic. It's just this mysterious stuff that the powerful people can do.
When it's like you have to understand every single molecule of that stick, and when you do, you can make every single molecule of that stick into an explosion because you know every single molecule of an explosion. And it's like, okay, so if you know everything well enough perfectly, you can do anything.
One of the things that I appreciated in what they did with the magic was emphasizing how its usage, how its understanding has changed over the centuries.
Hmm.
We've got some ancient magic that has different sorts of powers and abilities than anything that's really known and common in modern times. Fenris the Feared is an example of that. The things that have been done to make half of his body invincible. This is an ancient magic. He's hundreds of years old. He's basically immortal now. This is not something they do to people anymore. So it's an ancient thing. I liked that element to the magic.
There's also a relative implication that most magic is old. There's not a whole lot of like new mages.
No.
And a lot of that I think comes down to the mages that do exist don't want to share.
They're totally gatekeeping.
It's intentional.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Agreed.
But I love some of the non-magics we get here. Magic does, to a certain extent, come from the other. Seems like all magic is witchcraft. It comes from hell.
Logan talking to the fire demons.
Logan talks to spirits.
The fire spirits. Spirits in the flames.
But that's a totally different thing. That's still interesting because it's different. As opposed to, oh yeah, no, she like doesn't feel pain, but also like can shoot a bow ridiculously far.
You're talking about Pharaoh now.
Yeah, and super accurately.
She's just
because she's
magical.
got devil
demon blood.
Yeah. It's like,
yeah,
she is magic. She didn't control it. She didn't choose it. She just is. And that's cool.
Yeah. Yeah. It's those unique aspects of Pharaoh and Logan that partly bring them together in some weird kind of attraction, love-hate relationship. I mean, that whole thing was a little weird. And I'm not sure how it ended, really. It just kind of stopped, but not. I don't know. It's confusing.
Neither one of them was willing to commit to making it actually work.
Commitment issues? Those two? Go figure.
It's almost they were too committed to other things.
Yeah.
And they weren't willing to
It's too bad. They could have actually been good for each other.
If they'd been willing to let that go, would have been good for both of them.
I enjoyed the multiple times they were being good for each other, right in the midst of the camp and under the awkward ears of the others.
Jezebel did not appreciate.
No. Let's talk about Column West. Major West, who becomes Colonel West, and eventually becomes Marshal of the West. Not of the West, but Marshal West. He has an interesting story arc. He's a guy that, as close as you can get, might be a genuine good guy.
He gets as close as you can to being like a good protagonist, doing his best in the Union.
Offs the heir to the throne.
Which is does it righteously right thing to do.
The guy deserved to die.
And had he been left alive, would have continued to lead people into death. And do other horrible things. So, he deserved it.
So, he's, as you said, as close as we can get to a good guy, a protagonist who's genuinely someone you cheer for, but he murdered someone. So does this
Yeah.
make him a bad guy now?
It makes him a good person who did bad things. There are definitely bad
Oh.
people who do good things in this series. He's a good person who does some bad things.
But why did he kill the heir? Not because I need to stop this monster. He killed him
Eh,
because of what he
or
just did to the woman, and he's getting revenge.
it wasn't just that, but it was that. Like, it was all these other things, and it's horrible and all this, and then ultimately it was like,
And you
okay,
pull
all of
that,
that,
that's it.
and
You're
this
done.
is who I'm protecting?
Yeah.
This is
He
who it's
snaps.
all for? No.
But I cheered when it happened. I was like, yeah.
Yeah.
Punk needs to be
Yeah.
gone.
Rightfully so.
Yeah. And then we've got Jezzel Don Luther, who all he really wants is fame and acclaim. And he gets all, perhaps more than he ever could hope for. He gets the power, he gets the glory, he gets the girl. Not the girl he wanted, but a girl that everybody would want.
But he's
And ends up fairly miserable.
he's the perfect empty puppet.
Do you feel bad for him at all?
No,
I do, a little. But tell me why no.
because the corrupt union perceives him as a good person and a hero and all this. But at no point during the first book am I sitting here going, yeah, no, he's an upstanding hero. He's a good person. It's like, no, this guy is a product of the horrible, corrupt. He's nearly as bad as the prince who we just cheered for getting murdered.
Not quite that bad, but
No.
he's got a pretty strong narcissistic
But
streak.
if put in the right circumstance for that, I think he is that bad. I think we don't see some of the worst. He has a horrible reputation of being a womanizer who uses women, maybe even abuses to some extent. And it's like, this is not a good guy. He's just the guy that everyone in this high society kind of idolizes for right now.
And yet, here's where I feel just a little bad for him. Finally, at the end, he's in a position of power. He has seen now a little deeper into what the world is really about, and he wants to do good. He finally wants to do right and make things better, and gets slapped down as a puppet.
Yeah.
So now that he could potentially do the right thing, he can't do squat. He has to just do whatever Glocta says as the mouthpiece of bias.
He has, I'll give him this, he has character growth. Because he
that does him no good. Yeah.
Put through situations and shown things to be molded into this perfect puppet position. And if it wasn't a puppet, it's like, yeah, we did put you in a position to be maybe not a bad ruler. But also, you're stupid and still have the first 20 years of your life where you were awful.
You were awful.
We don't trust you.
Another thing, the eaters, they're icky in this story. Khalul's creations of these actual cannibals who gain special magical abilities by eating people. Icky.
I almost don't feel like they're as icky as I initially want to think of them. Just because you get perspective eventually where it's like, no, breaking the second rule, doing that, it's so bad, it's icky, it's the worst thing. But the person who's really telling you this is Baez, who then breaks the rule that it's worse to break. So it's like, okay, how much of this actually is, and how much of this is they're just willing to do that?
Still icky.
Is it a lesser evil that's kind of icky? Is it just as evil and it is icky? Am I overthinking it and giving them too much grace, being like, they're cannibals and I'm trying to justify them in any way, shape, or form? No, I don't think I am. I don't. They're not justified. But
it did give us a nice twist at the end of the second book. as Glokta does finally get down to the root of what happened to his predecessor. And I enjoyed that. It was a good twist.
It's easy to make them disappear when they've been eaten.
Yeah.
Just ask Sweeney Todd.
Did you ever see the recent? I don't know how recent. The recent movie version of it, Sweeney Todd.
You're gonna have to be a little bit more
The
specific.
Barber of Fleet Street.
How not recent are we talking?
The one with Johnny Depp.
That's nowhere near recent. Got it.
There's more recent than that? I think
no,
that's
it's
the
just
most recent one.
The most recent.
That's why I said recent, but not really recent. I said that. I prefaced it right.
Therefore, I was asking how recent are we talking?
I couldn't tell you how recent that is now because I'm old and these things blend.
The answer is no, I haven't seen that one.
It's actually not bad.
We'll get to it eventually.
Okay. Let's see. What else should we talk about? There's just a few last things that I think we haven't. I mean, have we talked enough about Fenris the Feared?
I mean, we barely touched on him, but there's again just like that's a story that I almost want to know more, but I want to know more of way back. Like I don't care about now.
How did he come?
I don't care how we got here. I want to see some of the stuff from way back. I don't know if we ever will, and I think that's potentially okay.
And of course, Logan defeats him, but only by cheating. Although Logan isn't the one who actually cheated. I believe it's Colin West who loosens the armor so that Logan can finally get through.
If one side of you is invincible, I think that's kind of also cheating.
But Logan went into it knowing that. So, it was an interesting character. I definitely liked that face off. And again, that's where he has to let the Berserker side out. Has no choice.
There was a little part of me that also was always kind of like, okay, how has he never been stabbed enough through on that side to cross over into the side that isn't invincible? Because it's not that he doesn't like take damage. He gets stabbed. It just like he doesn't care and it doesn't kill him. But has no one ever tried to like put a pike through him from the side so that it goes through to the other side? Like, has that never happened?
Apparently not.
He is a
pretty badass warrior, and he's over 7 feet tall. And take away the invincibility stuff, he's still pretty badass and hard to take on, regardless. Yeah. All right. We haven't read beyond the first 3 books. We established that already.
Correct.
There are 3 standalone novels after this that do advance the storyline in various different ways. I haven't looked into deeply what they're about. I got one spoiler in prepping for this on one of them. Nothing that ruined it, but I know that a character is featured in there that maybe wouldn't have been. I'm not going to say anything more about that.
I think I know what you're talking about. That's my guess.
And then after the 3 standalones, then there's another trilogy that, as far as I know, finishes the First Law series. I don't know if Abercrombie finishes it in a way that he couldn't write more, but that's all that's out now.
Is that one done?
Yeah. The latter 3, I'm pretty sure they're all out.
Well, my brain said I didn't know if it was actually a 3 or a 4, and the 4th wasn't out.
Oh, maybe there is one more to come. I haven't looked too close because I don't want to know yet. So you could be right. Yeah. But my question for you, and if you already read some spoilers or something, then maybe you can answer this. I was curious if you had any predictions. What's to come. But if you already know stuff, you can't give me predictions.
I can give tiny things here and there, depending. I can tell you the standalones, I think, are going to open up the world a little more with us as well. And most likely, at most, one of the 3 will involve the Union directly, like at all. Otherwise,
Ah,
it is centered around places that are elsewhere. Maybe it
okay.
talks about, but it's like, no, it's a self-contained story somewhere else. Maybe it even ties back to things that happened, but we need more to this world. I can't talk too much more about the standalones because there are things I know about like certain characters that might be
Yeah,
in something
yeah.
here or there or not.
I mean, obviously, I would predict that something either in the standalones or in the next series, we have to know what's going to happen with Pharaoh. Pharaoh's gone off to kill the emperor of the uh, Gherkin Empire,
Gurkish.
Gurkish Empire. We have to get some story there. We've got to know what happens with that.
I don't know if we will.
Obviously, we have to discover what happens with Logan Nine
I do think
Fingers.
that's one of them. That's
That's got to be one of the
it's gotta
points
be.
here.
Probably
Does he
not the
go on to
first
better
one. Probably
things?
was mean.
What else is going to happen with Baez? What else is he going to do? What more will come? That's got to be part of these stories.
Here's my kind of hope. I know the sequel series, there's a time jump of a bit
Which you just love.
because we are into a more like at least industrial, maybe even steampunky age.
Okay.
Which makes me really excited for okay, who's the new player that we maybe know about already, maybe don't know about, who's going to be bringing more of the Canadius Master Maker stuff back into play.
Mm.
And I want to see that as a major player on the great game again.
Okay.
Because we had way back in history the three brothers and the war against Glestrad there, and then the falling out between the two. And we've really had Kalul and Baez for a while since, and there hasn't been that third player.
Mm-hmm.
But Baez really is in the Glestrad role,
Yeah.
whereas Kalul then is kind of in I don't remember his name, the mage one, that who I think it started with like a J.
Y. Started with a Y.
Was it?
The one that actually went and found Pharaoh.
No. The one who
Oh.
was Baez and Kalul's teacher.
No, I don't remember that now.
Kalul's kind of more in that role, but no one's in Canadius's role. No one's in the Machine Master Maker role. So I want that.
Okay. Well, maybe we'll get that. All right. I think we've dissected this all enough. I think we can definitely say we enjoyed the First Law Trilogy. There's far more right with it than there's wrong with it. We didn't have much criticism. We found a lot of fun things to talk about.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Definitely, if you don't like Grimdark, don't read the First Law Trilogy, though. There's some brutal stuff in this trilogy. And I imagine that continues on from Lord Grimdark.
I think I was like 2 chapters in when I looked at Rachel and said, never read this book.
Yeah, I would never give this to your mother. Try this fantasy. It might be good. No.
Not because I don't think she should, but because I don't think she'd like it.
No, not at all. All right. Shall we wrap?
What are we wrapping? Are there presents?
Not yet.
Are there bars versus?
Some people are decorating for Christmas already now because Halloween's over. It's like, people, there's Thanksgiving in the middle. Come on.
But not that many people decorate that much for Thanksgiving.
It's true. All right. Well, that's where we'll leave everybody then. Let me play the outro. Let's see here. I don't always do this, but we will today. So there it is next to us. As all these things reminding you of how you can connect with Zach and I come along, we encourage you to do what it says, especially that like and subscribe thing. That's really appreciated. We love how many of you have found our channel and subscribed now. And for those of you listening on an audio feed, thank you for that too. We'll keep it coming out there as well. I think the thing went by Patreon just a moment ago. Thank you to all our Patreon supporters. We love and appreciate you. Want to say anything, Zach?
Not really.
That's enough already. All right. Thanks for watching, everyone. We'll talk to you next time.